Welcome back to the Record Low Rollers. Is this 1.0 or 2.0? It's like 2.1, 2.2 technically, because this is episode 2 of like the second iteration. 2.2.
Should we just call this episode 2?
I think that's a good call. We'll just start calling them episode 2 because, that old shit be defunct, my guy. Um, Last time we talked about barbarians in great detail.
Perhaps too much detail.
Far too much detail. They're not super complicated. But this one's for the DMs. Talking about low level monsters here on Record Low Rollers. You just want to go ahead and jump right in, or do we want to pontificate?
Let's do a little bit of preface, I think.
All right, lay it on me.
I feel like this episode is going to be for maybe not first time DMs, but definitely early days DMs. This is the sort of, I don't know, advice column. Are we a column now?
I mean,
Sort
I
of
think to be
advice.
a column, we'd need to be in print.
That's fair. We're a column of ones and zeros on the internet.
Yeah, there you
Uh,
go.
Sort of advice that I kind of wish I had had when I started DMing. Just We're going to talk about some common low-level monsters that are relatively easy to read in the monster manual and then throw at a party. We're going to talk about what makes them good low-level encounters and what makes them, I suppose, easy to understand for new players and new DMs.
Okay, it's pretty succinct. That's really nice.
Yeah, I was flying blind the first time I DM'd in 5th edition. So I was just like, today I've just made a bunch of like low level characters. I made a bunch of like level 1 fighters. And I was like, here you go.
Oh
And
man,
and yeah, that was a bad idea. So don't do that.
don't throw 5 or 6 level 1 fighters at a party.
Yeah.
Heard. That sounds like it could go very poorly, given
It
the
did. It did.
the action economy and the way that fighters work. Their action, not their action surge at level 1. They get a fighting style and second wind. They'd be very hard to kill.
Yeah, I just decided to not use second wind.
I don't blame you.
After the first guy used it, I was like, oh no.
Brought this guy up to full hit HP. That's very bad for a low level party.
The party
Um,
has one spellcaster and he already cast all one of his spell.
oh
So
God.
he
Uh,
was a warlock. He cast Burning Hands. It was really good. And then there were still like 4 fighters. It was a problem. But anyway, we're getting off topic.
yes. So at the top of our list here, we have goblinoids. They're some of my favorite monsters just because you can throw oodles of goblins at like a level 1 or 2 party. Um, like the beginning of Lost Mine of Phandelver hits the party against like I think 6 or 7 goblins in the first encounter.
Quite a few goblins.
That's a lot of goblins for like maybe 4 or 5 player characters.
Yeah.
Um, it was nasty. It's a nasty fight. I've played the beginning of Lost Mine of Phandelver like I think twice. Once with my most recent group and one time in college. And that goblin encounter is incredibly lethal.
Yeah.
And then following that, because goblins they have like a disengage action if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they can disengage or hide as a bonus action.
That's that hide in the forest. It's really nasty. Goblins make like really good skirmishers for that reason, but they only have like 7 hit points. So if they get in, melee with somebody, they're not going to last long. Maybe a round or 2.
Yeah. I think that, your standard, oh, here's a half dozen goblins in the woods. They jump out of the trees and out of the underbrush. Yeah, that's pretty standard sort of encounter. Very evocative, very Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Just they're not super tough, in my opinion. Maybe I'm overstating it.
I
But
mean, AC 15, HP 7. That's a good hit from any like level 1 martial character.
yeah,
Could knock that down like in one shot.
I feel like, and maybe I'm starting to gamify things too much, but like I feel like if a level 1 rogue gets sneak attack off, that's probably gonna be it for a goblin.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. Cuz
So yeah,
anything with 2 damage dice is going to probably kill a goblin in one shot.
yeah,
When we played through the most recent Lost Mine of Fandelver, I was using a greatsword, and a level 1 war cleric gets uh, wisdom modifier extra attacks as bonus actions. I was cleaning shop. It was bad. Like, if anyone else couldn't get into melee, it was like the Rook show.
yeah.
um,
Obviously, I wasn't in that game with you, but the way you described it, you were pretty much a guy with a sword who happened to also be a cleric, rather
yeah,
than a
100%.
cleric who used a weapon sometimes.
Oh, yeah. By the end of that game, I only had like a 14 wisdom, but a 20 strength.
Uh, I mean, priorities, people.
Absolutely. But yeah, goblins are good low level baddies. I'm also a big fan of hobgoblins. Like, goblinoids in general are fun, but hobgoblins are only CR one half rather than one quarter like a goblin. And honestly, the difference is kind of huge.
I'm
Because a
quite fond.
hobgoblin.
Go ahead.
No, what was that?
I'm quite fond of hobgoblins. I ran a homebrew campaign for some people a few years ago, and I had them come across like a hobgoblin village, and they sort of skirmished with some border guards at the edge of their town using the standard hobgoblin stat block, and they had a hobgoblin captain, which is a CR3, to sort of make the encounter a little bit more difficult and a little bit more strategic. Just hobgoblins have 11 whole hit points and 18 armor class.
So they can tangle a little bit longer for sure.
Yeah. But they also have martial advantage. Once per turn, the hobgoblin can deal an extra 2d6 or 7 damage to a creature if that creature is within 5 feet of an ally of the hobgoblin that isn't incapacitated. So essentially, sneak attack.
Yeah, they get sneak attack, but without being sneaky because they wear chainmail and shit.
Yeah, and they use long swords and stuff.
That's potentially very lethal damage
Oh yeah,
for like
especially
a level 1 party.
yeah, they're CR one half. You put two of these guys in a room with a level 1 party. It's
That's a fair
pretty
fight,
it's pretty even odds on who's gonna win.
honestly. And I think martial advantage does not say anything about it being a melee attack. So they could break out their longbow,
Yeah,
and that's really nasty.
it
That's
really
really
is.
nasty. Um, I haven't looked at the captain stat block, but I'm sure it's nasty too. Like CR3, it probably has what, 50, 60 hit points?
It has 39 hit points and actually a lower AC at 17.
Really? That's
Yeah,
shocking to me.
but it makes two great sword attacks.
Oh shit.
It has 3d6 on that martial advantage sneak attack type ability. And it has a short or long rest ability called leadership, where for a minute as an action, uh the hobgoblin can utter a special command whenever a non-hostile creature it can see within 30 feet of it makes an attack roll or saving throw. They add a d4 to the roll, and yeah. So,
So it's like a miniature bardic inspiration kind of?
yeah, sorta. Just it's sort of a guidance or a resistance, but it also applies to
Yeah.
attacks. So like I feel like hobgoblins, goblins are good if you just need a big old swarm of, here, have 6 of these to fight.
Yeah.
Hobgoblins are good for introducing a certain amount of strategy to a fight if you want a fight to be more difficult without being, like, overly complex.
Oh yeah, because keeping track of just like, is there a goblin ally within 5 feet of the target that the hobgoblin is attacking? That's a super easy way to keep track of like where the bonuses are coming from, which
Yeah.
is nice. That's super important, especially for low level play.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, I love running ancient dragons as much as the next guy, but like
yeah,
they have so much going on, and then you have like lair actions which are complicated, and you have this and that and the other. And it's like there's a few hobgoblins. One of them is next to you. It's gonna do a little more damage now.
it's a really easy to track loop, which is important. Um, and then going up the hobgoblin goblin tiers, you get to bugbears, which are really, really nasty.
They really are.
Dealing an extra damage die every time they hit. It's their CR1. So one of these guys against a first level party is enough. Um,
I think
again,
calling
lost
them
might have.
enough is very fair.
Yeah, exactly. It's so much damage. So much damage. When they're in melee, if they are able to get off a sneak attack with their Morning Star, that is 2d6 plus 2d8 plus 2. That's over lethal damage for a first level character, for sure.
You've mentioned Lost Mines of Phandelver. Now, I have never played Lost Mines of Phandelver, but I have listened to The Adventure Zone, or at least the first 2 series of it.
Yeah.
Uh, and their introductory adventure was Lost Mines of Phandelver, a very heavily edited version, but Lost Mines of Phandelver nonetheless. Hearing their fight against the Bugbear at level like 2 was tough.
Yeah, man. That fight with Clarg, I think is the name of the bugbear, if I'm not mistaken. Clarg, which is a
Yeah,
great name for a bugbear, honestly.
they made it a more social encounter because it was a podcast and they didn't really know what they were doing. No shade on the McElroy family. I think they're great, but like
Who doesn't love a good McElboy, honestly?
just the very much the early days of the Adventure Zone were winging it, to say the
Yeah.
least. But yeah, bugbears are pretty nasty. They have 27 hit points, and that doesn't go very quickly, especially at low levels.
Yeah, low levels, that's a lot at like level 1, level 2. That's so much HP.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, they're nasty. They're like goblin leaders basically. Like if you throw a bugbear at a level 2 party uh with some goblins and maybe a hobgoblin as well, that would be a really nasty encounter.
Oh yeah. I mean, even at as high up as level like 3 or 4, if you put like a pair of bugbears, a small contingent of hobgoblins, and some goblins in the walls, these guys stay threatening for a very long time in early game,
Oh yeah.
level.
Their bonus to hit isn't huge, but that damage of 2d8 plus 2, that has an upper ceiling of like 18 points of damage. That would knock out most anything at second level.
Oh yeah,
Like, and even
especially
third level, that could knock down any sort of like arcane caster.
yeah. Just if you're squishy, if you have not invested in Constitution, if or even if you just rolled bad, so your Constitution's only like a +1 or less. If this thing gets its hands on you, you're probably gonna go down in a single hit, which is frankly really rough.
Really scary, especially in the DM seat. Like, if you are a first time DM, they're like, okay, this is CR1. I can throw one or two of these at like a second level party. Um, and then the bugbear gets to the back line to like your wizard, sorcerer, druid, cleric, anything like that with a D8 hit die or less. Suddenly, you're probably scrambling like, oh no, this thing does so much damage, and it's a tough situation to be in as a DM for new players and as a new DM, like not knowing where to go with that kind of encounter, you know?
Just, I feel like we've talked a lot about the numbers of D&D, not
Yeah,
necessarily on the show, but in person. And it does sort of feel like, especially at low levels, you have to be very mindful of these numbers in a way that like higher level parties just don't really have to deal with. Hey, barbarian, you just took like 80 damage. I'm fine. Okay. So,
absolutely just shrug it off. It's like, oh, I'm fine, I'm resistant to every type of damage.
but if you're like, hey, wizard, you took 8 damage, that might put them down.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. When we played our most recent session, you and I, uh and our sorcerer got cornered by an animated broom and just two shots went down immediately. It was super scary.
I was playing a Hildorf druid, and you were a paladin?
Yeah, half
Yeah.
orc paladin.
Yeah, you took like a shot from something, and paladins are relatively sturdy, and you were almost dead after one hit.
Oh yeah, I had 4 hit points out of my total 13 after that animated armor just socked me one good. It was bad.
Just low level play, I'm not particularly fond of, in part because it is so swingy, and I feel like having goblinoids, goblins, hobgoblins, bugbears, I feel like there's sort of a very standard fantasy. It's a low level enemy, and that can be more dangerous than you think it is.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's a slippery slope if you're not like paying attention to, like you said, the numbers. The numbers matter a lot more here. Um
We're not the first people to say that CR or challenge rating isn't an exact science,
oh
but
no.
I would be very careful. People talk about the action economy. If the bad guys can put out more attacks in one turn than your party can, you should probably not be doing that at low
Oh
level,
yeah. That's a super
because
it's scary, man. Like
that's death sentence.
yeah, as soon as the NPCs, the monsters get more attacks than the player characters, you're looking at a death spiral because when one person goes down, that's one less attack and so on.
Just let's talk about the archetypal 4-person party. You have a fighter, a rogue, a cleric, and a wizard. They can do, each of them can do one thing on their turns, assuming you're not like dual wielding or anything.
Yeah.
And like that fighter's gonna have to do a lot of heavy lifting because, you know, let's say an average fighter does like, I don't know, 8 damage in an attack. That
That sounds
sounds
fair.
reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would take like 4 or 5 hits on a bugbear. And the bugbear in the meantime was able to put out like 11 damage with every attack, which will
Yeah.
drop your party members more than you think they will.
Absolutely. It's scary, man. Low level DMing is a lot of fun, I think, but you know, the numbers matter a lot more.
I find it intimidating.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm DMing a campaign right now where we're all level 15. So like
That's very true.
technically the barbarian's level 16. She drew a card from the deck of many things and leveled up.
That's
But
rad as hell, honestly.
I don't know if they're gonna listen to this, and I kind of hope not. But like, they've plucked a good amount of the good stuff out of the deck of many things. Most of the stuff that's left is like your soul leaves your body.
Ugh.
Yeah. I left that one in because I thought it was funny. And it'll give me something to do.
I mean, honestly, and that's dungeon, right? Or
Maybe.
dungeon?
I
Yeah,
think so.
whatever it is. It is an adventure generator.
Oh yeah.
Um, which is always fun. Who doesn't like questing to find a soul?
Yeah, the soul that's trapped, probably.
Exactly. Um,
I would allow that player to roll up like a new character for that mission, you know?
yeah. Or maybe commandeer one of the NPCs.
We don't have a vast well, we do have a vast wealth of NPCs to pick from, but I don't think any of them would want to play as them.
I get that. I get that.
Just I made a lot of very support heavy NPCs and because none of them will fucking take care of themselves. So like I don't think they'd want to pick up my strictly support bard that I have rolling around with them.
Which subclass did you give that bard, if you don't mind me asking?
Eloquence. It was a terrible mistake.
Yeah.
I should have stuck to my gut and gone with valor, so that they could add it to like damage rolls. But like, I was like, oh, eloquence because they don't have a face, and I was like, yeah, they need a face to interact with me, the DM. I'm not gonna talk to myself. But it was new and shiny, and Theros had just come out, and I really liked it. And I was like, so yeah.
I think that's a reasonable honeypot. You know,
Yeah.
I understand why you went with it.
Yeah, I should have just gone like Valor or Swords. That's where my heart was really. But it was shiny and new. I really wanted her to be a paladin, but I polled my players, privately. And I was like, "Hey, yeah, like if you had to have a support NPC, what would you like them to be?" And I gave them a few classes to pick from. And to a man, they all said Bard. And I was like, God, okay, Bard it is.
That's it's good of you to pull your players like that. But honestly, that's rough. You made a face to interact with yourself.
I did. I hate it. We did briefly have a face character, but he doesn't play with us anymore. So,
That's a
yeah.
bummer.
It's complicated, but we don't need to get into that.
Speaking of hating things, I want to talk about gnolls. Gnolls are my favorite low level baddies, like bar none.
I I can't say I agree with you there. I have a different favorite low level enemies that we'll get to towards the end, I think. But tell me about Knowles.
Okay, so gnolls, as per the lore of the Forgotten Realms, they are like the spawn of Inogu, the endlessly hungering, enormous anthropomorphic hyena that stalks the abyss. Yeah, that's super rad. Gnolls themselves, like the monsters, are like hyena men, and they're born when a hyena like feasts on a corpse that was killed by something. Like it's crazy, and then that hyena like explodes into a gnoll, right?
Sure.
Isn't that fucked up? It's pretty gross. Um, but mechanically, gnolls are really nasty. Even like the CR one half, just plain Jane gnoll has 15 AC and 22 hit points.
That's pretty rough. I briefly used Knowles in my homebrew campaign I keep mentioning, like way back when they were level 2. And yeah, they pack quite a wallop.
Their attacks don't do a huge amount of damage, but they have a really good command of the action economy if you can start dropping characters.
Yeah.
They have this ability called Rampage. If they drop something to 0 with a melee attack, they can move and then make one of their bite attacks. Like, it's really nice, and it pairs well with the other Knoll abilities because there are quite a few kinds of Knolls. These aren't really in much of a pecking order like like the goblinoid structure, because these things are, born of demons, that sort of stuff. Um, the lowest CR Knoll is undead, actually. It's called a Witherling. It looks like just a pile of bones, kind of shaped like a hyena person.
I'm pretty sure that's in the Wildmount book.
Is
Pretty
it
sure.
really?
I think so.
That's dope. That's super cool. Because I know that in the first like arc of the second Critical Role campaign, they dealt with gnolls in the.
Huh?
What was the name of that town? Do you remember?
Uh,
Allfield? Is it Allfield?
Allfield, yeah. I was
Yeah.
about to say Targo Vista, but that's not because I've been watching Castlevania.
I'm
But,
like a couple episodes deep in season 4, and I'm loving it. It's
yeah,
really good.
I
Uh,
finished it last week and just so good. Anyway,
this Witherling actually makes more attacks than the standard Knoll. They also have the Rampage ability, which I think all Knolls have. Um, the Witherling gets a bite and a club attack, or two with its club. Um, but as a reaction, um, if a Knoll is dropped within 30 feet of it, the Knoll Witherling can make an attack. These things, when they start to group together, just really command the action economy.
yeah. I know we're gonna talk about swarms later, but like, if you can throw a group of the same kind of enemy at someone, first of all, good job because that's less for you to manage as a DM.
True.
I know I've tried to be like, oh, I'll have this diverse contingent of goblinoids, and oh god, it gets so confusing. But yeah, if you just throw like a pack of gnolls at someone, and they just start rampaging around the battlefield, that's scary. That's really intimidating. Like I'd say up until level like 5 or 6, your party's gonna be in trouble if they see a band of gnolls.
Oh yeah, because Knolls don't really travel alone either. They've got like demons and shit that travel with them sometimes, as well as like just normal hyenas, like a beast, like we'll talk about later. Um, yeah, they're Knolls are pack animals, and they travel and fight as such, which is really scary. Um, the next is the Knoll Hunter, and in Roll20, it's classified as a giant, and I think that's a mistake. I
Probably.
I think it's supposed to be medium humanoid Knoll, not medium humanoid giant. But, just a little clerical error.
D&D Beyond has a few bugs still.
A couple for sure. Um, it also gets 2 attacks with its spear or its longbow. It's got 22 hit points like a normal Knoll and less armor, but it also gets the rampage feature. Um,
That is something I've noticed as we've been going through these. The higher the lethality of the creature. If they're trying to keep it at a low CR, they usually like strip down some armor on the creatures. I think
oh
just
yeah.
to balance out like, oh yes, we're talking about hobgoblins.
Hmm.
Hobgoblins are harder to hit than hobgoblin captains. And like as we've been saying, it's very much a numbers game. Just if you can hit the commander, that's gonna leave a bigger dent in what you're hitting than if you just take out like, oh yeah, that's just like a guy.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because like the commander gets more attacks and is generally more lethal, but they're easier to hit. So it's I feel like 5e has done a really good job of that balancing game. Because I can think back to earlier editions where it's like, yeah, this creature just has a million AC and always hits. And it's got a billion hit points. So, you just can't fight it or kill it. Unless you're like a triple multi-class, like whatever the fuck.
We'll
Very
talk about
specifically.
multi-classing and all the assorted pitfalls therein another day.
Oh, for sure. For sure. The last knoll I want to talk about is the knoll Flesh Gnar, which, of all the names for a monster, something that gnaws upon the flesh is really gross. And this is the only like low level knoll that is CR1. After this, they start to get up into like 2, 4, 8, that sort of stuff. Um, this one is CR1, I think, because it gets 3 attacks. It can make 2 short sword attacks and a bite attack in one turn. Yeah, and they also get a like a 60-foot. This is what I was telling you about before we started recording. This is the one that gets the monk sprint with no opportunity attacks.
Ugh, that's nightmarish.
Yeah, I can imagine this thing just dropping down to all fours and sprinting at you. No, thank you.
If I might add something, you mentioned it having 3 attacks.
Yeah.
I'd say, advice to my past self as a younger DM. Try to spread those attacks out at the party. Don't just like, hey, fighter, whack, whack, whack. Like, that's, you'd say it's probably good strategy to focus your fire on an enemy. But, like, this is not chess. This is a role playing game. So, if you're just gonna, like, target spotted, time to throw out all my dice. John. It's like, that's not gonna be a good time for John.
No, the balancing of attacks and who they hit and where they land. It's hard to learn. It is definitely a sense you kind of develop as a DM. Like the sorcerer hasn't been targeted with an attack in like 2 rounds. We should target the sorcerer rather than, you know, focusing fire. And it's also good to not announce who your knoll is attacking, like before you start rolling dice. Because if you land a crit on one of those and you were intending to attack the fighter all 3 times, you should spread one of those attacks somewhere else.
Just, monsters are not made to, kill your friends. Like, D&D is ideally not Mario Party. You should still be friends with these people when you're done playing. But, like, as a DM, you gotta be sort of careful about it. The DM expects for their, for the vast bulk of the warm bodies that they put on the table to die by the end of the night.
Oh yeah, NPCs like monsters have a super short shelf life, like maybe 3 or 4 rounds. At this level, probably 2 or 3. Like at low levels, low level fights go a lot faster than higher level fights.
But a lot of players, especially a lot of newer players, are generally pretty attached to the people that they make. I remember when I made my first character, I would have been beside myself if something had happened to him. So, like, yeah, don't just clown on your friends. Like, yeah, as DM, it is technically your prerogative if, an ancient red dragon drops out of the sky and uses its fire breath and just burns them all to cinders. But, like, that's not the point of the game.
That's very poor sportsmanship.
It's not even poor sportsmanship, it's just stupid. Like,
yeah, honestly.
Like, what are you proving?
It's like, oh, I chose to sit behind the DM screen. Haha, I win.
It's the most powerful class.
I'd never thought about it like that, but yeah, absolutely.
We talk a lot about what classes are good and what classes are bad, and as we do our class breakdowns in the coming weeks and months, we're definitely gonna start hitting some of the like softer, squishier sorts of things. And like in general, the game is balanced that if you are physically weaker, you can usually do something cool.
Yeah.
Like, oh, the wizard can shoot fire out of his hands. That's fun. Oh man, the bard who only has light armor proficiency. Yeah, maybe you play like a super cool acrobatic swordsman bard who has like good armor class. Most bards are not that.
No, no, there are I think two subclasses for being a an armored bard or something with like a high armor class. That is
Yeah.
also a bard. Most of them are squishy faces, man.
Squishy faces with, some cool support tricks. You know, if you're just. I used to not really love bards all that much. I didn't like bards until I played one, and then I appreciated them more. But, like, if you just have a vendetta against. Oh, God, I hate when players play monks. I don't know why monks get a lot of shit on, like, Facebook and Reddit and whatever.
I have some ideas.
I have a couple ideas as well, but, like, if someone like is playing in a way you don't like, if someone is doing something you don't like, it's very tempting to be like, well, I'm just going to get rid of this character that I don't care for. My null makes 3 attacks against John, and now you need a new character that I like now. Like, you can do that, but that's not the point of what we're doing.
Exactly, exactly. It's the best way to avoid that, in my opinion. That's sort of like antagonistic, like, haha, I win, is to be a big fan of your players' characters. Like,
Yeah.
whenever I'm in the DM seat, I am rooting for the PCs that I'm running for, even when I throw ridiculous shit at them, you know?
I've oftentimes compared the DM's chair to like a director's chair for like making a movie.
Hmm.
You're not there to make your main characters look bad. You're there to make them do something impossible and something cool and something interesting. You know, Peter Jackson didn't sit down and say, I am going to kill off Gimli because I don't like dwarves. It's just like, yeah, no, you're gonna give him like a cool axe and you're gonna give him cool armor. And yeah, there's gonna be tons and tons of orcs for him to fight. And some of them are gonna be tougher than others. But like, you're not it's not the DM versus the players in most circumstances. It's like, you're trying to set a cool challenge for them to overcome. And these low level monsters are probably going to be the first ones you throw at them, and they can be really difficult to balance correctly.
Oh yeah, like these low level encounters can be really scary for a DM. Like I'm sure just as scary for the players sometimes. And you're like, oh my god, I just got hit for 8 hit points. Ah! But like as a DM, you're probably sitting behind your DM screen like, holy shit, that did 8 damage. My wizard has 10 hit points. What am I gonna do? Which that would be an astronomically buff wizard with 10 hit points at first level.
That's level 2 wizard at that point.
Yeah, for sure. Um, how do you feel about moving on to orcs?
Sure, I feel like orcs have been the subject of a lot of controversy lately.
They really have, and I get it. Like D&D has a weird history. Not even weird. D&D has a very negative history of uh
With
doing
race.
really racist shit with orcs, like, and I think that starts back in, you know,
That's just,
Tolkienian writing.
yeah. I mean, Tolkien said some pretty gnarly things about various racial groups and comparing them to orcs, and it's the whole thing. But
Yeah, it's pretty
like,
gross.
orcs as enemy stat blocks. Well, first of all, if you feel uncomfortable throwing orcs at your party because sometimes they've been coded as non-white people,
Yeah.
That's fair. You can reflavor it as like, you know, some sort. I'm a big fan of reflavoring things on this channel. We'll talk about that some later.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, if you pull the word orc back, you just have a big bag of meat points that makes melee attacks. I
Yeah,
have made that like essentially a lower tier shambling mound. Like a big like plant monster thing.
that's really cool, actually. I
Like
like that.
I didn't change anything about it. It's just now it's not an ethnically ambiguous, you know,
Yeah,
problem
it's
spot.
yeah, it's not a big ol' you know issue that your players could have. Instead, it's a you know a big plant monster, which is
Yeah,
a lot of fun to tangle with. Actually,
yeah,
like orcs mechanically have some really cool shit going on. Like I like their aggressive bonus action, move up to its speed toward a hostile creature. That's rad.
yeah,
I like that it deals great axe damage with each hit. That is an upper limit of like 15 hit points,
yeah.
which
That'll knock you on your butt. That's for sure.
that could one shot a first level wizard, for
Oh yeah,
example. Like if you
easily.
have 7 hit points because you've got one in Constitution, that's a dead wizard. One shot, just decapitated. That's
Yeah,
a rough way to go for your first level character, but man,
yeah. Didn't,
these
didn't you
creatures
do
do that.
that once
Oh,
in
I think so.
like 3.5?
Yeah, I killed
Yeah.
I think it was a chain golem. I killed one of Peyton's characters.
No, I
Um
mean like the last time Matthew played with us.
oh,
He
yes I did. Yes,
had
I that was
like
a
he had like a level 1 druid or a level 1 fighter or something.
I think
You're
the
like,
character was a rogue and
yeah.
got totally just like
I think
throat
he rolled
slit one
like
shot.
like a double crit or something because he could multiple crit in older editions or something, and he just died. And it was like the first attack you had made in that combat. And he's just like, I'm gonna go home now.
And he never came back, which was kind of a bummer because Matthew was fun to play with. Um, I felt bad about it. I That happens though. These creatures are scary. um, and at the time, I think I had like multiple factions of orcs, and these ones were like followers of Shar, and they were monk orcs using long swords with special rules from 3.5 for weapon wielding monks. And yeah, man, 3.5 was such horseshit. I
There's a
loved
lot.
it at the time, but looking back, man,
There's a lot going on.
I'm haunted by feat trees.
Cleave, greater cleave, whirlwind attack.
Oh my god. Yeah, exactly. Um,
I specially built a barbarian to get whirlwind attack. You know how often I used it?
Only when you crit. I think that was only once,
Yeah,
if that.
it was exactly once. And I think I missed most of the attacks as part of whirlwind attack.
That's a bummer. That's a huge bummer, honestly.
I know they made a tip of the hat to it in the Hunter Ranger subclass, but like I am terrified to go close to it because it's just like, oh yeah, if you're getting dogpiled, then like you can swing on everybody, and it's like if you're getting dogpiled, you're probably already dead.
Yeah, the action economy is not set up for player characters to take like how many squares can how many squares surround a 1 5-foot square? Is it 8?
Eight, eight
Yeah, if you
total.
take 8 attacks minimum in a round, you're probably gonna die.
Yeah, unless you're
Like,
surrounded by like easily decapitated low level enemies.
which I think we're gonna talk about next after we talk
Yeah,
about orcs. Um,
that's fair. That's fair.
Speaking of orcs, they've got this weird racial history, like
Yeah.
super problematic place right now in D&D, and it has been for a while. Um, that said, mechanically, I really like them. And I think there have been some changes recently, especially like with Eberron and uh Exandria. That's the whole planet, right? I almost said Wild
Yeah.
Mount.
Wildmount is the continent, but Exandria is the planet. Yeah.
Yeah, Exandria and Eberron have made pretty good strides in the direction of making orcs not, as the blurb here says, savage raiders and pillagers with stooped postures, low foreheads, and piggish faces, with prominent lower canines that resemble tusks.
Oof.
It big oof. It's like, come on, man.
I just you could probably I talk about flavoring. You could probably flavor it as closer to like a moblin from like The Legend of Zelda, where it's like, oh, it's like a big pig monster. But like I feel like that doesn't even go far enough away from that.
I agree. I think it's the conception that these are intelligent creatures. Like, these are a humanoid species, like, they're a playable race. They are a playable lineage that any PC could snag.
Yeah.
But when they're in the hands of the DM, they're treated like,
Savage Mongol hordes, essentially.
yeah. And
Which
it's
is really
fucked up.
not kosher.
No, it's rough. And I know that I've tried to fix it before in a game by like scrapping the whole conception of half orcs. It's like, nope, no half orcs, because that just is
It got
gross.
very aggressive. It got
Yeah.
very
3.5 was specifically like, yeah, orcs are nasty hordes. It's like, okay, we're gonna skip every bit of that.
I remember I played a dwarf. I played a dwarf paladin with you as my first character with you. And I remember in 3.5 dwarves had like this racial ability called like blood hatred or something, and they just like got a +2 to damage against orcs, so they just hated them that much. And it's like, okay, this is problematic.
Yeah,
Let's skip that.
exactly. And that's why I like Eberron's conception of orcs so much. It's like, yeah, these guys are in tune with nature. They fought the first incursion of like Rakshasa demons. It's like, this is super dope. And then in Exandria, it's like, yeah, these are just like, they're treated more like Goliaths almost. It's like, yeah, they treasure prowess and might, but they're not going to flatten a village. That's not what they
Yeah.
do.
I mean, they
I don't
probably
know.
still could if they wanted to, because they are quite good. But like,
I mean, so could Goliaths is the thing. Like, I remember in campaign 1, the traveling herds of Goliath. That's kind of how orcs were and are treated in the Forgotten Realms. It's really, I don't love it, you know.
yeah, I just I like orcs as like a concept. I like the idea of this like, you know, we people talk. So my degree is in history. My undergraduate degree is in history,
Yeah.
and we spent a lot of time talking about civilization and what it is, and how the word civilization is used in a lot of propaganda.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, those people are less civilized. Those people, they lack culture and they lack sophistication, and whatever. Oh, they don't even write down things. They don't use the same utensils that we use to eat. They just eat with their hands. That's so uncivilized. And it's like, well, just because something is different doesn't make it bad. And I feel like orcs have historically been the societal other.
Yeah. Like, they are treated like, as if they are subhuman and that sort of stuff in the fiction. And I think that as like a DM, it is incumbent upon us to like, treat the fiction as you would reality in a lot of cases. Like, yeah, maybe don't treat orcs like that in your setting. Maybe don't make the players only fight savage orcs and never portray them another way.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I like to treat orcs the way that like The Legend of Zelda treats like Gorons. Yes, this is
Yeah.
distinctly a different group of people. They have a different culture, they have a different society, they live in huts on a mountain. But, like, they're not lesser than, and they can speak common just as well as you. And you probably don't know the lay of their land as well as you think you do. So, yeah, I think that you can pull a lot of inspiration from fiction that uses different races getting along. And, it's not bad to use orcs as antagonists,
No, not at
but
all.
don't just use orcs as antagonists.
I think that's where the issue comes from. Like, yeah, for sure. Um, Mechanically though, really nasty CR1 half monsters. Like that Great Axe is superb. And then they have like 15 hit points. Like they're not super beefy. They just lay out the damage because they use big weapons.
Oh, they only have 13 armor class too, so you're probably gonna hit him.
I really like orcs. I really like orcs. And I also really like the expanded orcs from Volo's Guide, but they're
Yeah,
all much higher CR.
I like playing as orcs as player characters. I think
Mm.
that they're I am probably more familiar with the player character stuff they get than the stat block in the monster manual.
I get that. I mean, they get some cool stuff.
Oh, they do.
Um, so here's a question for you, Kyle. We
Answer
are
for you, Tyler.
we are butting up against an hour. Do we want to knock out kobolds and do a part 2 of low CR monsters, or do we want to run over?
I would prefer to just run over. I feel like we're gonna edit out a lot of this, chitter chatter. So
Okay, too easy. Um, I think that wraps us up for orcs. Do you want to go ahead and move on to kobolds? Because those are a really fun low level baddie, in my opinion.
talk about kobolds. If I can find them.
I have the benefit of looking this up on the Roll20 stuff, but I've purchased all the books so that I can run games in Roll20.
I purchased all the books in person, so I have to thumb through them. But I
I've
have
also done
found
that because I'm a stupid shill. Ugh.
I found the kobold page in the monster manual.
Perfect.
Probably the squishiest low level monster you can throw at a party.
Oh yeah, they have 5 hit points, which is dismally low.
Yeah.
Like genuinely, I can't imagine them surviving even a single hit unless you roll incredibly low.
Just like if you're like a level 1 wizard and you forget you have cantrips and you use like a knife, or like you can't get out of melee safely, so you can't like throw a firebolt at it or something. That's about it though.
Yeah, it's like you have a -2 strength, and I'm gonna try to hit it with this quarterstaff I have that I used to cast spells out of. Yeah, I could see that. I could
I
see that.
just we are fabricating a very edge case. Kobolds are squishy. They're squishy little reptilians.
I kind of like how they're depicted in the 5e monster manual because they almost have the kind of dog-like nose as well as the reptilian features.
Yeah.
It's really nice. It's really nice. I'm looking at the expanded kobolds as well, like the Inventor, the Winged Kobold, Dragon Shield, and the Sorcerer. Those go up to CR1. That first kobold is only CR 1/8. And
That's quite low. The only thing lower than that is CR0, which are like cats.
yeah,
Like
a single frog.
I forgot they statted a frog.
They have
God.
stats for not almost every, that's hyperbolic. They have stats for a lot of just like little household creatures, you know. Um,
That's fair, I suppose.
Wizards need familiars, man.
I guess. Can my familiar be a kobold? No.
I'd say that yes, that's okay. It has 5 hit points. Yeah.
That's not a familiar. That's a manservant.
I would say that a Pact
Chopper.
of the Chain warlock could have a kobold as a familiar. I'd be okay with that.
Like a fiend warlock. It's like I release this soul out of my service because he's really annoying and I don't want to deal with him anymore.
A fiend warlock to Tiamat has a kobold familiar. I could see that. It's like I don't want to deal with this little guy anymore.
It's just a butler.
Just a butler. It's just yeah. Anyways,
Cast touch range spells out of anyway.
Your burning hands, sir. Kobolds get pack tactics, which is really nice. It reflects their alignment, which I think alignment is getting kind of like left by the wayside, which I kind of appreciate, honestly.
It's being phased out. I know in Van Richten's, which came out last week, it has some stat blocks that just don't have alignment in them.
Yeah, I kind of like it.
I'm good with it. I know we talked about the problematic history with the orcs a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Alignment had similar issues.
Yeah.
Not entirely the same, but similar.
I mean, it falls in the same vein, you know? Like, looking at this kobold stat block, it says that they are categorically lawful evil. All of them. This is the stereotypical kobold. They're all lawful evil.
They're evil, but they pay their taxes.
By contrast, orcs are evil and they do not pay their taxes.
They don't believe in taxes. They're all strict libertarians, orcs are.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
It's the worst kind of orc.
Oh, God.
I like the stuff that kobold gets. I like that they are, like, scrawny little dragon men. They are scared of the sun, and they are stronger in a pack. What it doesn't say on the stat block is that they build traps, and they tunnel into mountains and fill those tunnels with deadly traps.
Yeah.
I think the kobolds are the most dangerous for their CR. Like, even of the ones we've spoken about before, because of, like, the conception of, like, Tucker's kobolds, man. Like, if you're not filling your kobold warrens with deadly traps of, like, boiling oil and, like, poison darts, you're doing it wrong.
I will say, I did not use kobolds as low-level fodder in my campaign. They are also humanoids, so we should probably name check that they're like intelligent creatures who like have a language in a society or whatever.
Oh yeah, and they're not just beasts. They are people.
I sort of don't love the like inherent subservience angle that they have. I think that's kind of weird.
I agree. That's like the problem with the kobolds as opposed to the problem with the orcs. They are, yeah. I mean, D&D is full of monsters that are slavers. Like, that's their thing. Like illithids, beholders,
Dwargar,
Aboleth. Yeah, whole bunch of shit. Everything. You could throw a dart at a monster manual and you'd hit a page that has a slaver on it, most likely.
Yeah. I guess on the one hand, is it a good thing we're saying that slavery is categorically something monstrous to be wiped out? I mean, like, maybe, but maybe don't say everyone who has ever been a kobold is some sort of subservient dragon person. Like, it's
pretty
rough.
Yikes. Yeah, we don't love that.
But yeah, most kobold lairs are packed to the gills with swinging scythe blades and tiger pits and, you know, I'm gonna drop this, I'm gonna drop this jar, a bunch of wasps are gonna fly out, like...
That's my favorite kobold. The kobold inventor. It's like, yeah, I just have a stick with a scorpion taped to the end of it. I'm just gonna sting you with it.
Yeah, I mean, if it
amazing.
works... I do feel like Wizards of the Coast is trying to rehab some image just a
I
little
think
bit.
so too. I mean, they've got this new the new Drow stuff coming out. They've got like
Yeah,
two. Do you say Drow or Dro?
I say Drow.
Me too. I'm just making sure. Um, I
I don't
like
think
that
I've
they're.
ever heard Dro, actually. I don't think I've ever
My
heard that.
dad used to say Drow or Dro interchangeably, which I thought was really interesting. I was like, "What are you saying, Dro?" It's like, "Yeah, Drizzt, he's a Dro," and I'm like, "What?"
Yeah.
It was
Weird.
genuinely mind-boggling. Um, yeah, I'm glad they're doing some rehab work on the various issues with Dungeons and Dragons. I know that a lot of old heads are like, "Nah, man, I want my fantasy racist." It's like I'd rather not.
We're gonna talk about this when we get to talking about the Ranger, like at the end of the summer, probably.
Yeah,
But
yeah, that's
like,
likely.
I really love Rangers. I think they're like really cool in conception, and I really quite like them. What is favorite enemy if not fantasy racism on steroids?
Honestly, it's like, yes, I can tell this is a Dwergar print because of the scorn, and it's like, what the fuck does that even mean?
I can smell the hatred on them.
It's like that's just you, dude. Um,
Oh gosh, I do
so
think you could play like a ranger beastmaster with like beasts as a favorite enemy, and just be like Steve Irwin essentially.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
that'd be rad.
be like nice about it. Like this is my crocodile. gotta I gotta go use some crazy shenanigans, and I'm gonna have a crocodile now.
I would love that. Honestly, I would love to DM for Steve Irwin, the Ranger. I would love that.
Anyway, just
So you said just a second ago, drop a jar full of wasps.
oh wasps, yeah.
That the Kobold Inventor stat block is my favorite of the kobolds. It also has pack tactics and sunlight sensitivity, but its actions are a lot more diverse. It gets both the dagger and the sling like a normal kobold, but then it has like 8 options from like a flask of acid, a flask of alchemist fire, pretty standard, a basket of centipedes, which creates a swarm of insects with 11 hit points, um, which is horrible. A pot of green slime, which I think is an ooze technically, or I guess it's technically a slime. From the Dungeon Master's Guide. Uh, I don't remember what green slime does, but it can't be fucking good, right? And then rot grubs.
Ugh.
It throws a pot full of rot grubs that just like burrow into a person. It has the scorpion on a stick, like I mentioned, which deals poison damage, 1 point of piercing damage and a D8 of poison damage. Um, the skunk in a cage, which is depicted in the art for the Kobold Inventor. Uh, it's just this. It is what it sounds like. Um, it sprays people and gives them, I think, the poisoned condition.
Oh goodness.
Yeah. The target retches and cannot take actions for 1 minute. That's what it is. It makes them just vomit. It makes them very
Ugh.
sick. And then a wasp nest in a bag. It creates a swarm of stinging insects rather than a sting of other than a swarm of crawling insects.
Yeah.
I love the Kobold Inventor. It's so good.
I do love the kobold hat that it seems to have is like kooky mad scientist almost.
Yeah,
Oh, they're always making traps, and you got this kobold inventor. The winged kobold doesn't even really have wings. It makes like little like triangle shaped scaffolds that it glides around on.
it's like
Like
Daedalus and Icarus. It's
yeah.
like wax wings on a kobold. It's great.
Yeah. It's just like okay. This is fine.
The winged kobold drops rocks on people. I love it.
Yeah.
And it's CR 1/4, like the previous one, but it has like 7 hit points because it's based on the original kobold, not the um Volo's Guide kobolds, which are slightly stronger.
Yeah.
Because like the kobold inventor has 13, and then the next one, the CR1 kobolds, the Dragon Shield and the Scale Sorcerer, have like 44 and 27 hit points.
Oof.
Yeah, like
That's
the Dragon Shield is beefy.
quite sturdy.
I really like the Dragon Shield. Like they are champions. They're kobold champions. It's really nice. They get resistance to damage. They cannot be frightened or paralyzed, and they get pack tactics as well as sunlight sensitivity. And then they get a spear rather than a dagger or a sling. They're really cool. They're really cool.
I know in a recent Unearthed Arcana, they put out a new Dragonborn variant and a new Kobold variant. And I do think they are trying to refurbish the image of kobolds away from like, oh, they're scaredy cat little trap making stupid folk. And, they're trying to make them like these sort of I don't know, like fearless, tiny inventor types.
Yeah.
Just like are a little bit nuts, honestly, because they're like immune to the frightened condition and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting. I think that's really interesting. A lot of their lore talks about how like, oh yeah, all kobolds think they're just temporarily embarrassed dragons, and they will grow into dragons one day,
I love that.
which is sort of fun, but like, it can be a little meh if you do it wrong. But like,
Yeah.
huh. I just feel free to cut this next part out in post, but I'm gonna ramble for a second. Just kobolds are associated with dragons and associated with sorcerers and associated with the draconic sorcerer.
Yeah.
And it'd be like, oh yeah, that's the single kobold that's gonna like polymorph into a dragon. Sorcerers don't get true polymorph.
They don't?
Yeah, no.
That's
Not on that list.
horseshit. They should totally get true polymorph. That's bullshit.
Yeah. So, sorcerer level 9 spells. Blade of Disaster, Gate, Mass Polymorph, Meteor Swarm, Power Word Kill, Psychic Scream, Time Stop, and Wish. And I'm gonna pull up the Tasha's extra spells or whatever.
Arguably, a kobold, like a 17th level kobold dragon sorcerer, could wish that they became a dragon, but like, that's
Yeah, they didn't get it in Tasha's, so I guess that'd be Wish. That'd be their one wish. I wish I was
an
Would they
ancient
wish?
red dragon.
Would they
something
wish
like
to be
that.
an ancient dragon, or would they wish to be like a young dragon so they can like live the life of a dragon that they've always wanted?
I think they would probably wish to be an adult dragon rather than a young one, so they can be like big and scary without being like ancient and soon to perish.
1 foot in the grave.
Yes, the 1 foot in the grave dragon. It's my favorite dragon.
Is that a Dracolich, or is that just a really, really old dragon?
Ooh, man, Dracoliches are so cool. I think it would probably just be a really old dying dragon, actually.
Oh, I'm molting, and you can like, the wings don't take me off the ground anymore. Just it'd be terrible.
Oh man, that would be what a horrible existence that would be.
I think you could like have a good aligned like metallic dragon. That's like, I am a truly, genuinely archaic like copper dragon or something.
Been
And,
around
like,
since the beginning of time.
Like, I am the archetypal copper dragon. I am the first copper dragon. And I have lived a life of many eons. And I know my time is coming soon. But I will grant this one wish to you, Kobold. You too can be as old as I.
Oh, that's funny.
Goodness. Anyway. But yeah, edit all that out because that's just me musing.
We'll see. We'll see.
We'll see.
I'll probably edit it out. You're right, but whatever. So After the Dragon Shield is the Scale Sorcerer, which is actually like a sorcerer. You know, it has like sorcery points and everything, which I
Nice.
really like. Um, they have Heightened Spell and Subtle Spell, but they only have
Right.
3 sorcery points. So to cast Heightened Spell on anything,
At least all of them.
you need to use all of them. Which, I mean, shit, man. If you're gonna cast Charm Person on someone, be like, okay, you're gonna fail this save and you're gonna protect me and my buddies. Um, it would be a waste on like Poison Spray or something like that. Because all the rest of their spells are attack roll spells. They have Firebolt, Poison Spray, Charm Person, Chromatic Orb, Expeditious Retreat, Scorching Ray, Mage Hand, and Mending. So they have some utility stuff they can do. I like these guys. They've got like 27 hit points. In their art, they have the wax wings, like a winged kobold, but they're like producing a little ball of flame in their hands. I like these guys a lot,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah, kobolds, man. They're really nice. You can throw a bunch of kobolds at a party. They have 5 hit points and like super low armor class. You can just huck them at them, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think that kobolds fill a very similar niche to like goblins. Just I feel like if goblins are the ambush type low level enemy, then kobolds are the like you have stepped into their realm and they have some crazy, rigged up traps that are gonna shoot fire at you like Home Alone.
Yeah. I think goblins are ambushers and kobolds are like trap setters. They're trappers. They will lay a bunch of traps, but if you get your hands on one, you can just like rip it in half.
Yeah. I mean, the base kobold has 5 HP.
Yeah,
Like,
man. Like I don't know. That's by the end of uh Lost Mine of Phandelver with Rook, I could punch one and it would die. It's
I
like my strength is high enough to just insta kill any like CR 18 creature like that.
they also kill most like base commoner humanoids.
I did that on accident. I like spoilers for Lost Mine of Phandelver, but like by the end, the Mayor Harbin Wester had tried to like rob us of our money a time or two. Like, yeah, here's we'll give you 100 gold if you go and do this thing. And it's like, oh, here's 50 gold. It's like this is half of what you promised us. So at the end of the game, I like punched him, and I was hoping it would be non-lethal, and he died. It was yeah, it was a thing. I didn't realize they had like 4 hit points. I thought he was more than I thought he was like a noble, not a commoner, but he was a commoner. Um,
No, he's just some dude in some frontier town.
poor bastard, honestly.
Yeah.
So,
I feel
do you
like
want to
that.
move on?
I feel like that brings us into our discussion of low level basic humanoids in the back of the monster manual, like bandit
Yeah,
thugs.
bandits, man. They're if you don't get goblins or kobolds, you're gonna get bandits. Like that's the only other thing. Like at
I
this level.
disagree. I disagree. I think the next 2 things we talk about are also valid.
You're right. You're right.
Because I almost exclusively use the next 2 things.
I mean, they're perfect dungeon fodder.
Yeah.
But yeah, bandits and thugs. Specifically those two, not bandit captains, nothing like that. Bandits and thugs are CR 1/8 and CR 1/2, respectively.
Yeah. You
And
just have to
man,
throw like a cultist in there, I suppose.
that's true. We didn't include cultist in the
In the list.
in the pre-show list, but man, cultist is also a very good one.
Just these are bad dudes of ill intent, I suppose. Just I feel a lot better about like, oh yeah, this is a highwayman who's gonna shake down people who are just on the road, and like, this is an orc, therefore bad. It's like,
yeah.
He didn't do nothing to me. This bandit's about to stab me in the ribs over a copper, so I'm good with that.
Man, bandits in general are sometimes hysterical. Like, they're can you imagine being a D&D bandit and trying to like shake down a clear adventurer and getting just like cleft in twain? It's like, dude, what are you gonna do? Like, seriously.
Well, I mean, they shake down commoners. They have, twice as many hit points as a commoner.
That's
And,
true.
like, I mean, if you are trained to use a weapon with any level of skill, I mean, like, for all intents and purposes, the two of us in real life are commoners. Like,
Oh yeah, 100%.
like if I get stabbed, I'm gonna bleed out and die. I don't have any heroic resolve. I'm just like a dude.
Yeah, I get that. Me too. Um, but yeah, if a bandit shook either of us down, we would just die or be robbed. Probably
Yeah,
just be robbed. I would not be standing up for my fucking wallet. Um,
I don't carry cash, so I just be like, well,
like, you can
sorry.
take this card, but I'm gonna shut it off as soon as you
As
as
soon as
soon
you
as you
do
take it
anything,
away from me. You know, so it's gonna be a chunk of plastic.
I
Um,
have a debit card, a credit card, and my library card. Be careful with that. That's,
the real power is knowledge.
oh yes.
Um, but
Get
yeah,
back to a
bandit.
level 1 wizard, and then you can burning handsome to death, and that'll probably work.
Wow. Yeah, that'd be rad as hell. Um,
But yeah, bandits only have 11 hit points, so like an
adventurer.
average burning handsome.
They're CR 18. They're like the lowest. They're like a kobold in challenge. They don't have any special stuff. They have a scimitar and a light crossbow they can attack you with.
Yeah.
Like if you want to attack your somewhere like that where they are unprepared.
Yeah. Just, if you have to check your while the breaks out, yeah, you should probably check your weapon.
Check your weapons, war, my guy.
Rule, because they're bad people. This is with a knife, and then, you start throwing hands in a bar.
Yeah, it's stereotypical, not stereotypical, archetypal D&D. Bar brawls are very important to the fiction.
I almost had a bar brawl in the campaign I run. But then it became like arson, so like the building was burning down.
Oh shit.
For what it's worth, an NPC lit it on fire, not one
That's
of the
good.
player characters.
I mean, that's honestly much better than I thought it was.
Yeah, no. The big bad evil guy had sort of lured them into this tavern,
Mhm.
and I made a big deal about like, oh yeah, there's two taverns. There's one that's like really well maintained and really like up to code, and there's one that's like kinda, like its roof is leaky and it's kinda bad and it's kind of run down. They're like, well, we're gonna go to the nice one, and the big bad evil guy instigated a bar fight so they wouldn't notice that he had snuck off to like light the like thatch roof on fire. And he was trying to bring the building down on him because he's a bad dude.
Yeah, he be evil.
Yeah. But yeah, just I feel like the thing with thugs and bandits and stuff is they're people. You can talk to them. And
Yeah.
I think that's a recurring thing we've been talking about, like orcs and kobolds and goblins. They're all people too. You can talk to them.
Yeah.
They might not talk very kindly to you, but they'll talk to you. Just they only have stats because you're probably going to end up fighting them. That doesn't mean you have to.
Exactly. Like if someone had taught me any lesson about running D&D early on, it would have been like if I wanted to learn something, it would have been like, "Hey, how do I have every encounter not be a combat encounter?" You know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel like bandits and thugs are a good way to do that because, like, yeah, I'm calling bandits and thugs to a man bad people, but like, if you play it right, you could be like, oh yeah, this shaking, starving little kid is like accosting you for a gold, and like, if you really lean into like this is probably just like a sympathetic person who's down on their luck, your party might help them out, or they might just like cleave their skull in twain, but like, maybe they'll help them out.
Hopefully the former, not the latter. If they're playing good people, But the wanton murder of people down on their luck is never a good look.
Yeah. I think that you could. I think whatever choice your players make, you're gonna just have to go with, because like, especially if they're new, and a lot of these encounters are designed for new players, new characters.
Yeah.
You know, like if I were gonna roll up a game for my family, my parents and my sister, they've
Yeah.
never played before. I think my dad played a little in college, like 35 years ago, but like I don't think he's played any since then. Like if I throw a threat their way, I could see my dad just being like, bad guy in a game, whack. And it's like,
Yeah, of
yeah,
course.
but like if you have a sort of more complex thing going, and someone's like, I'd like to engage with the creature, or I'd like to engage with the orc, I'd like to engage with whomever, and be like, oh, this or that or the other. Oh, I speak goblin. I'd like to talk to the goblin. Then, like, at that point, just don't be a dick to your players.
Yeah, if your players want to speak to the goblin, let them speak to the goblin. It,
If
it
they,
seems it seems like common sense to me. But again, this is something I did not learn for a very long time.
yeah. I mean, I know some of our first games were largely just like they're basically structured like Mad Max Fury Road, where we just sort of mashed everything that got in the way, and then we just kept running.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And that kind of game is fun for some people.
Yeah.
It was fun to run when I was, a silly 18-year-old,
We were very new.
very new to the whole regularly playing pretty often, that kind of thing. As we've gotten older and more sophisticated, um,
God, we're not that old, are we?
God, I fucking hope not. Um,
I complain about the neighbor's music being too loud. I'm an old man.
hey man, if apartment complexes are rough for that.
The walls are
Anyways,
really thin. I could Kool-Aid man my way through my closet and just be like, "Hey, your
turn
baby's
down your
crying."
music.
Just
That's hysterical.
I just
Um,
like I have thrown clothes into the closet, into the hamper, and I have seen the wall give slightly. Like it is that thin. It is plywood. But
that's
anyway,
stressful.
it is. I hate it.
Again with the alignment. So bandit says any non-lawful alignment. So someone who's breaking the law, ostensibly.
Okay. I mean, I think you could reasonably infer that. Without it
Thug,
being
on the other hand, is any non-good alignment. Thugs are neutral or evil, whereas bandits are chaotic and neutral instead of lawful. I think that this is a good indicator. Like, this is one of the few. I think that this is the best way to do alignment, personally.
Yeah.
Any non-good. It's like, if you're going to have alignment, I like that system. It's like, hey, they don't tend to sit up here at the top. They're neutral and evil.
Yeah.
And I think that is reflected in the stat block because they get pack tactics. They can sneak attack essentially without the damage buff. They are good at fighting with buddies, and they are good at fighting. They use a mace. It's like a big heavy whacker and a heavy crossbow. They are brutes. These guys are tough.
Thugs, you feel like a mafia boss would hire a thug, and he'll like kick
Yeah.
you in the ribs if you cross him. Like, yeah, thugs are mean, but a thug could also just be like a bouncer at a bar. You know,
Exactly.
not necessarily like they're
Not
not a
necessarily a psychopathic murderer, just somebody,
yeah.
making ends meet, keeping the riffraff out of the local tavern.
Yeah, you could argue that any sort of repo man is a thug if you want to get down to it, but
Yeah, man.
just, someone who's willing to break a few kneecaps to do their job. And, like, honestly, isn't that just what an adventurer is? But we could pontificate for a while.
I feel like that's the whole point of the first season of Dimension 20. It's like, yeah, the principal Eggfort calls out in the first episode. It's like, yeah, we go to foreign locales and commit incredible violence for gold. It's like, oh shit, man. I guess that's right.
I know Brennan Lee Mulligan was in some non-Dimension 20 chat. He was like, wizard schools, they should just essentially be like murder schools. This should be like boot camp. Because if the only way to get experience is through combat, and it isn't, but if it was, day one of classes, all right, kids, pick up your wand, pick up your spell book. We got some goblins out in the woods. We're gonna go kill them. Just, allow
Yeah.
your encounters to be complex and allow your characters to have motivations that aren't just smashy, I'm the Incredible Hulk, I'm gonna hit something.
Yeah. Not every creature needs to want to flatten the nearby village,
Yeah. I do think that segues us pretty nicely into the next group of monsters, which very much isn't complex.
No. This next group is this your favorite?
My favorite is actually the next one, but this is a close second. We're talking about undead. We're talking about skeletons and zombies specifically. Okay, so my favorite class at the moment is Paladin. It kind of rotates between Paladin, Cleric, and Warlock usually. I love undead as enemies because you don't have to worry about like, oh man, is this zombie just trying to feed his family? It's like, no.
Well, he might be. He might be trying to feed his family, but not in the way that you're thinking.
Yeah, true. But like, I love undead. Yeah, they're very archetypal D&D for me. This is a good enemy if you just want to throw a bunch of dudes and have no moral complexity to it. In the campaign that I run, our first encounter, before I was the DM, actually, that's a long story I could get into another time. But our first encounter was like, oh, the town's being raided by zombies and skeletons. So fight them.
Do the DM thing. Do the D&D thing.
Yeah, and I think the thing I like most about them is undead fortitude. They have, I'm looking at zombies right now.
Yeah.
They have an 8 armor class. That is pitiful.
If you can't negative dex, man.
Yeah, if you can't hit that, then you rolled really, really bad. Like probably like a 3 or lower on the D20.
Yeah, at first level you're gonna be rolling like 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3, maybe 4 if you rolled bad for stats.
Yeah.
The thing I like about them is undead fortitude. If they are reduced to 0 hit points, and they have 22, that's not going to go super quick, but pretty quick. If you reduce them to 0, they can make a constitution save, which they're not bad at. And they can keep on trucking. They have a lot of endurance, which I find so fascinating. Because, your party can kill them several times over, quote unquote, kill them several times over, and they will just keep coming.
It really reinforces the fiction of a zombie. It's like, yeah, you keep dealing lethal damage to this thing,
Yeah.
You're
Like,
cutting off chunks, and it just will not stop trying to bite you and
you're
claw you.
cutting off arms and legs. You're going full Monty Python Black Knight on this thing, and it's still crawling. And I think that's a lot of fun. And
There is
skeletons are largely the same way.
there's a variant of the zombie called the Strahd zombie, um, from the module Curse of Strahd. That as you deal damage to them, bits will come off and be similarly violent. Like arms will claw at the ground at you, and like yeah, it's scary. It's deadly. I think they're CR 1/4 or 1/2. They're a little bit stronger than I mean, 1/2 or 1. They're a little stronger than the standard zombie because of that. It's nothing to shake a stick at, man.
That's fair. That's fair.
And skeletons are really rad. I love skeletons.
I think that, undead are, again, a morally uncomplicated sort of thing. I feel like it really rewards players who pick classes like Paladin and Cleric, two of my favorites,
Mhm.
because they specifically, at level 2, get undead slaying abilities.
Yeah, like turn undead and smite.
Yeah.
It's the good shit.
And, like, yeah, it makes you feel powerful. I feel like it's, it feels good. It feels like you've picked a good class, and it feels like you're cooperating well with your DM. When we talk about Rangers in a few months, I will definitely be talking about favorite foe, and I will probably be talking for way too long about favorite foe and favorite enemy. But, like, if you have a party and they have abilities that allow them to do very specific things, such as, I do an extra DA to smite when I hit an undead, or I can turn undead, or I have tracking bonuses against this type of thing, make an effort to make those players feel like they made a good choice. Like, don't be like, the ranger wants to be good at tracking beasts in the woods. We're going to set this underwater, and they're going to exclusively deal with aberrations. Like, don't do that. But there's a lot of things that are really good at fighting undead, so I feel like undead are kind of the archetypal low-level thing to throw at a party.
Yeah, I think they're perfect for low level play. Like for the exact reasons you were just saying. Like there are classes tailor made to fight them, and they're uncomplicated. You can throw a horde of undead at someone and be like, okay, you're good to go. This is not something you have to stop and ponder.
Yeah.
Next up is beasts.
These are my favorite. These are the ones I throw at people.
Really?
Yeah.
I can dig it. What makes you so attracted to beasts specifically?
Well, beasts are uncomplicated. You don't have to convince someone to buy into the fantasy of, oh, here's an animate skeleton like Jason and the Argonauts. Oh, here's, here's a Lord of the Rings orc. Whatever. Here's a bear. You know what a bear is. It's coming at you. What are you gonna do? And there is specifically a skill in animal handling that allows you to, like, it's essentially a charisma skill for beasts. Except it's with just, I like playing a lot of wisdom classes. I'm currently playing a druid with animal handling, and I will soon be playing a ranger who is also pretty okay with animals. And, like, I think that, I mean, you look like folklore, you look like European folklore. A lot of the things that were scary about the woods were wolves.
Yeah.
Not, oh, a vampire will come through. No, it's like there's a wolf. It's big and scary. Don't do that.
Don't mess with the wolves, man.
Okay.
Oh, I totally get that. It's beasts are scary. Like
Right.
looking at even the low CR beasts, like there are some scary options in here. Like the flying snake. No thanks, man. No thanks. Diseased rats.
Yeah. Just
um,
the first combat I ran in my current campaign was a small pack of wolves. I think I rolled like 6 wolves and like a dire wolf just in the woods. Stumbled upon them while they were camping. They have pack tactics, so they have advantage on attack rolls if they have a friend nearby. And they have advantage on perception checks that rely on hearing or smell. Just they're sneaky and they'll track you, and you know that
that
it's
is a
really
scary fiction. Like being hunted by a pack of wolves
yeah.
is scary.
We have a whole Liam Neeson movie about it, so that's got to be intimidating.
That's true. I forgot about that whole movie. I forgot that even existed.
The Gray.
The Gray.
All the trailers made it seem like he was gonna bare knuckle box the wolf at the end, and then he didn't. It made me sad.
Yeah, honestly,
But
agreed.
oh well. It was not that kind of movie. It was almost like a horror movie, honestly.
Yeah, man.
It was structured like a horror movie.
And you could
But
kind of do that in D&D with a pack of wolves and first level characters. It's like there
yeah,
are 30 wolves in the woods and they will gang up on you and eat you. How are you going to leave your starting village? What's your
you
plan?
you see yellow eyes peering out from the underbrush. What do you do?
And
Just
then they have shit like lions in here. It's like, man. Yeah,
I
horrifying.
I know I talk a lot about Rangers, and I'm gonna keep talking a lot about Rangers. But like OG Beastmaster, you're probably gonna pick a wolf because like who doesn't want a wolf? Just I feel like a lot of you know low level, low magic fantasy. You can throw bears at people and call it a day. You know, and yeah, you can. I think we all as people intrinsically understand that like at least where we're from. Oh, if a bear's coming at you, it isn't necessarily gonna eat you. It might just be coming through because you are in its
Exactly.
area.
You might be able to get big and scare it away.
Hmm?
Like that's an animal handling check, ostensibly.
Yeah, or intimidation if you want to roll it that way.
Yeah,
But
true.
yeah, I think that wolves and bears and if you want to, you mentioned Drizzt earlier. If you want to throw panthers in there, like
Mm.
you have a lot of options for basically large animals that live in the trees, and they'll mess you up if you get too close.
Also part of beasts, and this is something that goes back to like my favorites, Knowles. They travel with hyenas. And man, hyenas get things like pack tactics. They're like just reskinned wolves, kind of. They're a little bit weaker.
Yeah,
Yeah, man. Beasts are great. I've never really considered just throwing like, yeah, here's a bunch of non-magical animals. They are scary. It's a good way to look at it, honestly, in a way that I don't normally look at, D&D.
just I like for maybe I'm just waxing philosophical at this point. But like I like for low level D&D to be more evocative of real life than fantasy.
Yeah, I
I'm
get
not gonna
that.
I'm not gonna have your first encounter be against like I don't like go in the cave, clear out the goblins, come back with the gold. Like that's yeah, okay.
That's a little too archetypal,
Yeah.
honestly.
I really like the sort of fantasy of like, okay, yeah, your adventures. For your first adventure, I need you to take this package through the scary woods to the next town over. And, because you guys are dumb and crazy enough to be like, "Oh yeah, I'm a master archer. It's like, yeah, you're level 1, kid. uh,
I'm the best archer in town.
Probably.
It's like I can hit a bird while it's flying in the air.
I mean, hey, that's more than I can do. But like,
Exactly.
but yeah, it's just like, you know, I was a Boy Scout at some point in my life.
Same, actually.
Yeah. Like I have met a bear in the woods before. And yeah, what you do is you yell at it. But if we were armed with like crossbows or whatever, then we probably would have started shooting. Just
That's
bears.
wise.
Bears are nasty. Bears are big and nasty and scary. And there's a, there's a reason we call it the Arctic Circle. It's the circle with bears. That's what it means in Latin.
I didn't know that actually.
Yeah, I
The
I think
circle
it's
with bears. That's funny.
yeah. If you go up to Northern Europe, it's chock full of bears.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So our last batch of low-level creatures, and this is kind of like jumping off from the last one. Swarms. Swarms tend to be made of tiny beasts. Though, if you want to get kind of wild, you can do like a swarm of zombies, which is fun. Um,
Yeah.
in here are also like some of the inventions that a kobold inventor would make. Like there's a swarm of rot grubs. You would need to reference this if running that kobold, for example. Same
Yeah.
for wasps and centipedes. Um, I really like swarms because I like the idea of being swarmed or of swarming player characters with like a cloud of bats and that sort of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I
They're useful, but they're not. They can really help to augment an encounter in a way that is um, evocative without being deadly because they don't do a huge amount of damage, generally speaking.
yeah. I like swarms of bats. And maybe that's just because like, Batman's cool. But like, they can fly around. A usual feature of swarms is that they can occupy the same space as a player character.
Yeah,
So, you can have that image of, oh god, I'm just being covered in wasps or whatever. And that's kind of terrifying.
incredibly scary. I remember we were doing that play-by-post game in the great D&D drought of like 2019,
Yeah,
2018. Um,
2019, I believe.
I threw a swarm of cranium rats at your
Uh,
character.
yeah.
Oh man.
Those almost did me in, man.
Yeah, man. They're scary. They do a bunch of crazy shit. They're
I was,
my favorite swarm. Easy.
I was like a level 3 monk, and I was just like, I can't roll well enough to get rid of these things.
um I love swarms. I think that they're a lot of fun. And you can do all sorts of fun stuff with a swarm, you know?
Yeah.
Like if you're having an encounter with vampire spawn, you can throw a swarm of bats at somebody. If you're having a encounter with like a mummy or a mummy lord, you can throw a swarm of beetles at them. I don't know. I think there's something fun about that. Or if you're an enterprising young adventurer, you could weaponize a swarm of wasps, kind of like Shadow of Mordor or Breath of the Wild. Like
Yeah.
punt a fucking wasp nest into a crowd of goblins and just see what happens.
Yeah.
I like it.
Just climb up on a tree and there's a wasp nest and just knock it down.
Exactly. Um, there's a lot of fun things that can be done with swarms as a DM or as a player. And they're not like a huge part of the game, you know? Like I think I've thrown maybe 5 or 6 swarms in my whole experience DMing. You know,
Mhm.
they're a fun little addition that can really help to zhuzh up a combat.
Yeah. I guess spoilers for my party, so skip ahead a little bit. I don't think that I don't think you're gonna be able to turn around and publish this before this combat happens. But the next big combat I have planned for them features several swarms of bats. And
Mm,
like I've said before, they're level 15, they'll be fine. But I feel like the thing with swarms is they have such an aesthetic to them. Yeah.
yeah.
You know, you look down the well and a swarm of beetles flies out at you, and it's we should not be here. Even though, my 15th level wizard, who is an absolute lunatic, could definitely destroy every single one of them in probably one spell. You still have that aesthetic of pillars of bats flying out of the columns, and it's it feels cool, even if they're
Mechanically weak.
mechanically they have what 6 hit points or something.
They have more than that, shockingly. Most swarms have at least 20.
Oh,
Like, the weakest of them, I think, has 22. But the
yes.
strongest of them, the cranium rats, have 36 and resistance to non-magical damage.
Yeah. So yeah, that swarm of bats has 22 hit points, and my my level 15 wizard party member is probably, if I had to guess, gonna throw a fireball at the thing in between the swarms of bats and will coincidentally kill them anyway.
That's funny. It makes sense, man.
Yeah,
Well, I think
just
that covers all the low-level beasties, right?
yeah, more or less. I feel like we hit all the things we wanted to hit.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we went over a little bit, but that's
Yeah,
okay. We might be able to trim it down some, like
I
a good bit, most likely. But
think you could. I think you could trim out a lot of the philosophical musing about kobolds and orcs that we did.
I kind of like that stuff. It's good to know. It's good for a DM, especially in this time where it's like, yeah, man, people are more conscious of the problems with the media they consume. It's important, I think.
That's fair. That's fair. Just I do think we did a lot of meandering, as we tend to do.
That is very true. Well, we want to go ahead and wrap this up.
Sure.
All right. Well, this was episode 2 of the Record Low Rollers podcast thing. Next time we'll be chatting about bards.
Bards.
I'm excited. I love bards.
I know you do. In our
um,
next DM episode, we'll be talking about spells and spell casting and how to account for that at your table.
I know that in 3.5 I did spells wrong for a very long time because Vancian casting is not my favorite.
Ridiculous. It's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot. Well, I have been Tyler.
I have been Kyle.
We'll see you again here next time. Yeah? In a week.